The worst horror movie I ever saw was fucking great.
Hello and welcome to This May Hurt a Bit. My name is James Strayer and this is
John C. Myers.
And we are a horror franchise podcast discussing each film in horror franchises. And today we are discussing Hellraiser from 1987. It appears from some of our listeners that this is an exciting one.
Yes.
And this is an exciting one for me as well. If people have asked me, even before doing the show, but it always comes up among horror fans, like, what's your favorite franchise or whatever? And I can never say with a straight face Hellraiser, because I always want to just say I like the concept of Hellraiser the best.
Yeah.
I like that first movie and the second movie a hell of a lot. But beyond that, there's 9 other ones. So we'll obviously get to. But just in terms of kind of subject matter and look and nastiness and feel, like this could be my favorite, kind of in a general sense.
Sure.
So I'm pretty stoked for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot like Texas Chainsaw in that way, where it's like, well, I know I know the 2 that I like. And then there's some of these other ones, but I'm not going to try to defend them.
Right.
We'll see. Like I've said before, I made it up to 4, but not through 4. So this will be a journey.
I have seen every one of these, only once, but there was a time when I was living with, friend of the show, Michael Holloway, and we would go up to Movie Madness in Portland, and each time they'd poop one of these things out, we'd rent it. And I think he watched them all with me, but I'm almost positive we got up through all of them. So as you pointed out to me via text, this is going to be a real pleasure and pain.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pinhead, one of the horror icons of the end of the 20th century. And when you think about these big franchises of that time, you got your Jason, your Freddy, Leatherface,
Michael Myers.
Yeah, Michael Myers. None of those guys went straight to video except for Hellraiser. Hellraiser's they dumped him into the realm of just video.
Right.
And so we'll see how that affects him. Yes. Not good is the answer. I shouldn't say that. I haven't seen them yet, but they have a reputation.
Right. Well, and again, keeping with the premise of our show, if there's good stuff, we'll be very excited about that good stuff in there. Like I want to find the diamonds in the rough of those very rough movies. But yeah, this is an exciting, very, very exciting one for me. And especially because as you start to dig into it and rewatch it, and it's kind of a known thing, but this one, for being a part of all those franchises, is nothing like those franchises in terms of the killer and that. Pinhead does not stalk people through the woods with an intent.
Right.
It's a very different type. Some would say more intellectual and highfalutin, and that's why I like it.
Sure.
I need intelligence in my slashers here. No, just kidding. It's not like just a fantastical serial killer going after people.
Yeah, it's a little bit more than that. I mean, this first one particularly combines so many different elements of horror. You kind of have the gothic haunted house thing. You have body horror. There's a slasher element, even Argento style kind of giallo of Frank and Julia attracting victims and then killing them. Yeah. And then also, like Argento, you have some very bad dubbing over some pretty crummy actors. Well, there's just one I'm thinking of. We'll get to. Yeah, it's just a culmination of a lot of different stuff, and a great monster that isn't even the monster of the movie.
Mm-hmm. A lot of cosmic horror, just sort of extra dimensional thing. That's where my interest definitely lies with a lot of these kind of horror movies. But you've got this series of creatures coming in from some beyond land is what I always respond to.
Explorers in the further regions of experience. Demons to some, angels to others.
You throw in lines like that and I'm hooked.
Right.
Hooked.
Nice. Yes. Literally. But yeah, well, I mean, and for being called Hellraiser, hell doesn't exist in this. It's not part of the Judeo-Christian sort of hierarchy that we know of at this point.
Right.
It seems a much more sort of, like you said, sort of cosmic outer world, but also weirdly personal.
Yeah.
I think Clive Barker in this is really good at sort of combining, like I said, those horror elements and that kind of high and low together and to just all make it very icky. He is a very icky guy.
Yes.
I mean, but personally, I don't know, but just his movies tend to be icky.
His movies, his books, his paintings, his sculptures. I mean, he likes the gross and the icky.
I bet he likes giving wet willies. That seems like a Clive Barker thing.
Gross.
Yeah, I mean, like, but that's like that kind of weird, that uncomfortable penetration. But but it's like
that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's Clive Barker.
The idea of the Judeo-Christian hell versus something out and about, I think, is really interesting in this film, because he does say stuff like angels to some, demons to others.
Yeah,
but there are overtures to Christian heaven and hell, but I just don't think that it ever like fits in there. And I feel like that's more of like a metaphorical type of thing.
Yeah. There's anything. Like Christian iconography, particularly like with the Jesus jump scare towards the end that is very funny. But it seems more just the concept of religion rather than like the specific sort of mythos.
Yeah. And to me, it would just sort of like, I mean, I like a goofy heaven versus hell type of action horror type of movie. But with something like this, I would feel like that would almost put it in too much of a box, if you will. And it just, there's too much possibility out there for Pinhead and the Cenobites to just be demons.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and perhaps cynically, I feel nothing. I have nothing to back this up with in terms of stuff he said or anything, but just this movie is already, for 1987, pushing so many boundaries.
Yes.
It's like, let's set that one. We don't need to like make that the forefront. We can kind of background that, because we don't really need to make it that big of a deal, because we're going to be, we're forging new ground all over the place. And so upsetting the apple cart of religion, maybe we don't need to go down that route just yet, because we got all this weird gore and sex stuff. We'll get to sticking it to the Pope later.
Right. What is your kind of history with Clive Barker? Have you read his books? I know we keep mentioning that one short story that we both love so much.
The Hills of the Cities. Yeah, like I've read the Books of Blood. Probably saw Nightbreed before I saw Hellraiser. But I remember wanting to watch Hellraiser in high school, and the people I was watching it with like left because it was too gross. Like when the body at the end like flops over and all the maggots come out of his mouth, it's like, nah, I'm good. Goodbye.
Right.
And like kind of being like, oh man, this was nasty. I don't know how I feel, because it made you feel kind of icky. And we'll get into a little bit why that is, or why I think that is. But and then I saw part 2 and 3 and really liked them because they were big and exciting, whatever. And then that's kind of it. I played his video game, the one Undying, Clive Barker's Undying, and that was about it.
Yeah, I've read the same stuff. I reread Hellbound Heart before we recorded this. I got a new. It was so frustrating. I went to my bookshelf and I was like, this afternoon I'm going to just sit down and read the Hellbound Heart. Couldn't find it. Must have loaned it out to somebody or something. So I walked up to Parallel Worlds, a great bookshop on Alberta Street in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, that place rules.
Copy. And went home, sat down, read it in a sitting. That always feels kind of good. It's a short one, but I have not read all of his more like fantasy oriented,
like Weave World and whatever.
Right. I know a lot of people love that stuff, and maybe I'll get around to it. But I quite like his paintings and all of his weird ghoulish stuff. And I always like listening to him as a person. He's just kind of interesting to talk to when I've heard him on podcasts and such. It's kind of well-trod territory at this point, but it's, he grew up going to gay clubs and BDSM clubs and goth clubs and stuff like that in London in the early 80s. And that's
as an adult, he didn't grow up doing that.
Grow up. Fair enough.
You ever see Oliver Twist? Well, it's that, but it's inside a gay S&M club.
Hey, that would have gotten me to read Oliver Twist in high school. Thank you very much. Yeah. But no, he a lot of his experiences, and being a bit of a hustler at the time too, when he was trying to get his writing career off the ground. So it's especially in the early 80s during AIDS and that kind of thing, and even worse kind of like public feeling towards the gay community. Like, I think that really imbued this series of movies with that sex is dangerous idea. Just living your life as a sexual being could be dangerous, let alone if you wanted to add all the fun stuff like hooks and chains and restraints. he was seeing.
It explores it a little bit deeper than, say, your typical slasher, your Jason, where it's like, people are having sex, time to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
The violence is sexualized in this way that's not sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some that in the background of Frank and her relationship, Frank and Julia's first meeting.
Yeah.
But that it is like that kind of merging of sex and violence together, that, with him cutting his Larry cutting his hand on the nail, right, as Julie's kind of having this fantasy, and just sex being violent and gross and strange. He really played with that a lot.
Leans into that. Yeah. Even just a very queer male gaze, like that shot of Frank when he shows up in the rain at the front door. I mean, that's a sexy shot. There's no two ways about that, So I really enjoy how he frames his men in the movie. I mean, like one of the earliest shots is of Frank, nude, surrounded by candles, looking all sweaty and hot and everything. So I'm glad he was able to imbue his own gratifications in there.
Yeah. And since that particular shot was, it's Julia's remembering of him, that he's, even hotter than before, which is kind of funny for us. As transgressive as this is, there is kind of like a conservative core to it about, because the family is so splintered and fractured, allows this evil to get in. And it's because the weird sexual conquest that this stuff happens. So, just hey, you should still love your disappointing husband, I guess. Yeah. But, no, but it is about that pursuit of pleasure and the kind of people looking for that, and how that can get you into trouble.
Do you think that Clive Barker judges the people who look for pleasure? I mean, not necessarily, and I don't think the Cenobites do either.
Yeah, it's just what that can lead to. Because I think
cautionary tale.
A big difference between the movie and the book. I didn't finish reading the Hellbound Heart. I just only had time to read a little bit of it. When the Cenobites show up, they're like, "All right, well, tell me about yourself." You don't just open the box and they're like, all right, we got you, which is kind of what happens in the movies. But there's a little bit more like, all right, well, you passed the first interview. Now is the second one, and we'll figure out what you're into. It almost seems like there's got to be this consent to it. This well, you want to do this. I'm not just going to pop out of the box and start hooking your face up. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're kind of like vampires in that you have to invite them in, so you have to there is that idea that Frank thinks that when he's opening the box that he's going to be surrounded by beautiful young women who will satisfy him sexually in every possible way. Nope. 5 different weird demon guys show up instead and basically ask him what his kinks are.
Right.
Which is fine, but then they're like,
yeah,
oh, that's so small compared to what we're going to do to you.
Yeah, just opening the box and a bunch of middle-aged guys in diapers show up. And this is actually really cool. And then he gets, that's the movie, as he gets way in the diaper play.
Yeah. I mean, touching on the book briefly, I do like how in the beginning of the book, there's a lot more of a ritualistic sense to opening the box.
Yes.
And there is, I think we mentioned before, I just really like when this idea of occult magic is actually, it takes days or weeks to make something happen, a la, that movie I love, The Dark Song, something like that, where it's like a true test of will. Not anybody can just open this box. He had to have I always remember it like a carton of his own urine that he was supposed to pour over his head as a sign of transgression or something like that, if they demanded it. And there was a plate of dove, it was dove or pigeon heads, I forget which, that whoever he got the box from was like, you're going to want to have some pigeon heads around. Yeah.
Put out some appetizers, put out some mozzarella sticks. They love pigeon heads.
Dipping sauce?
Oh, you got to have dipping sauce.
Yeah, that's where the urine comes in. God. But no, there's this real transgressive sense of he's doing something very strange to open this box. Yeah. Not just, definitely later on in this movie, and for sure later on in the sequels, where it's just yoink, 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 twist, twisty, and Cenobites show up.
That's all you got to do is just open the box.
Damn, the box is cool though. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's one of the coolest just horror props that I think has ever been made, really. I only just learned this, watching some of the stuff about the making of it, that the box, when you change it into the star shape, or the more diamond shape, that
little etchings end up like showing the engineer a bunch of different times.
So much thought went into that. And like, evidently, like if you can find screen used versions of the box on auction, like they go for like $20,000-$30,000 for on the collector's market.
Yeah, because there were a bunch of different ones that they used for this, and then even more for at least part two, I think. But because each one kind of had a different thing it would do.
Created by Simon Sace. He was the props person who created it. I think he passed in 2017. But I mean, if you create something like that, your career is like nice and set. Well, I don't know if it's nice and set, but like personally, I think you can sit back and relax a little bit.
Well, there's, or else everyone's like, hey, could you give me the box, but not the box?
Oh, God. Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It's just that for the rest of his life.
Yeah. The box calls forth the Cenobites. As we have mentioned, they are not so much the villains of the story, but they do kind of propel things forward. And the book does remark that they are part of the Order of the Gash. Ooh,
yeah, like that's ridiculous, but it's also like that is the most Clive Barker name.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, it's a vagina. Also, it's a gaping wound. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's Clive Barker, baby. And just like, oh, did you want subtlety? I'm sorry. No.
But yeah, what I like about it is, especially in the book, it really kind of drives home the point that they're a monastic order. Like that is where you can get a little bit into the whole, like, are they demons, or is this in a religious sect type of thing? But I enjoy the fact that he's just sort of like a weird hell monk or something. Like all of them are, even though they're like have all their own cool personalities and such. But it does feel like more orderly, I guess. He's just trying to get shit done. Really, they're
kind of middle management in that, because you have. Apparently in the book, the engineer has more of a, like, he's the big cheese, where in this, he's a weird monster.
A weird penis monster.
That they just kind of show up to get people, and then if they escape, that'd be bad for them. Maybe they'll get fired or something. I don't know. But the movie does just leave a lot open to what this all means, or who exactly these people are, what do they serve, and what's exactly going on. Because when we're introduced to them after Frank opens the box, we just get a little picture of his torment. We see these giant pillars spinning around with bits of, I guess, Frank nailed to it.
Those are so great.
Is the idea that they've been doing that, and he's just been feeling all of it and is conscious the whole time, which is terrifying to think of. And then I just loved it. The movie opens with finding bits of his face and putting it back together.
Oh man, that's great.
And I guess they reshot it because at first they had used some actual meat. And like British censors were like, you can't do that because that implies an animal was killed for this movie.
Yes.
You can't do that. So they had to redo it. But it works a lot better with the fake face put together.
Oh, I think so too.
And then I just like they put his face together and then they disappear. They get sucked into the other realm.
Right. Man, the effects of that opening bit just really do kind of drive home what you're in for. Just the spinning pillar with the flesh nailed to it is such an image that, like, this is where we're going, guys. Pay attention, and obviously the chains in the face and that kind of stuff. But I don't know. There's something about those pillars and just like the floor full of guts and meat, which it just seems so much grosser than a lot of stuff at the time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Particularly like at this point in 1987, stateside, you had the MPAA starting to really crack down on the slashers, because this predates the fight that Buechler had with Friday the 13th, Part 7 with the MPAA, coming down on other stuff. The video nasty in England, where in the early 80s, where they were like censoring everything. There was still a lot of like strong censorship in England. So again, like pushing those boundaries and what they kind of had to do to get away with that. I think you can see some stuff kind of gets cut, maybe, because like at the end, particularly when he explodes, it's like, well, did that effect not work because you see it so briefly? Or is it like, did they like, no, you've already done so much, we can't possibly get
it was the latter, because I thought the exact same thing. My brain went to the effect. Did they just have to cut the shot before the effect fell apart? But no, I listened to a commentary when Clive Barker said, like, nope, there's a much longer version of that where he gets completely torn in half. So but as always, it's funny to know about the MPAA coming down on the sexual things too, where Frank can give 2 thrusts, but not 3.
Yeah, where like their initial meeting was going to be, or like when she flashes back to the affair with Frank, that it was going to be a lot more sort of Tyler Durden and Marla from Fight Club or something like that.
Sure.
Just it's a lot more sort of like rough and tumble and really like wet and sweaty and
more aggressive.
More aggressive is a great word for it. And they're like, no, you can't do that. But he can cut off her nightie with a knife. That'll do the work of that, which kind of makes it a lot creepier and but still kind of it just changes the dynamic of their relationship a bit. But it still works.
They definitely had to cut back here and there. So speaking of Frank and Julia, do we think this is a romantic love story between the two of them, or what is Julia's motivation here? We kind of know Frank's. I mean, obviously, to me, Frank is just using Julia to get back into this world.
Right.
She's just another woman sexually to him.
So basically, there's an apocryphal story about someone on set calling the story is about a woman who I forget the terminology that they use, but they were
trying to think of alternate titles, and a female crew member said she suggested the title "What a Woman Would Go Through for a Good Fuck." Yeah.
And I think it's that, like, so she's very unhappy with her marriage to Larry. Neither one of them really want to talk about it. They're moving to wherever. It's not really clear where this is supposed to be, even though it's London. But it's like it's the little America neighborhood of London. Like, you go there to get the best high fructose corn syrup. You can't get that anywhere else.
Cheeseburgers,
cheeseburgers. Right. So when they have the affair, and it's like, oh my God, this wild passion. She's been obsessed with that and can't stop thinking about it. Certainly being in the house doesn't help. And then, so when she has the chance to be with this guy and this is a way out, but it's using him to an extent, but it's also she is way into him. Like, she is convinced that, like, if I help him do this, then he'll have no choice but to count on me.
Right.
Lord knows Frank is a good guy.
He will make good on that invoice, I'm sure. Net 120 millennia. Yeah. Do you think that there's ever a point where she kind of turns? So she lures back 3 men for Frank to kind of, like, I don't know, suck the life force out of, drink their blood, not vampirically, but she clearly gets more comfortable with it as it goes along. Do you think that by the 3rd one, she's kind of into it and she's like, this one's for me? Like, I'm kind of into the idea of this murder and this pain. Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, Frank ends up sort of taking over for it. But the first one, she definitely is a lot more skittish about it. It's like, oh, this is terrible. But it's getting Frank back and knowing as she learns that, like, she is indeed not only reconstructing him, but saving him from this other force. I think that's part of it. But there's also something within her that kind of like that mirrors Frank's sort of pursuit of this forbidden pleasure. That's like, I actually have some control in my life now, and I got to do these things, and I'm powerful, and falling into that. But also, just it's called based on called the hellbound heart. It's she is doing this for him. So I think there's a little bit of like convincing herself that she loves it. And I mean, I love the shot of it's about halfway through the movie, something like that, where this stuff's been happening, and it's just her sitting there, like brooding with a glass of wine or something like that, and you just see her kind of start to smile. And just like all the interiority that's happening there, I could just watch forever. Claire Higgins does amazing stuff as Julia. I think that's where I started feeling like she's still doing it for Frank, but she's starting to get some pleasure out of this herself. She's starting to become an explorer in that realm. An explorer of incredible fashion. Yes. When she goes to that first bar, that like almost like new wave looking bar. Yeah. That, like the all white. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Incredible. Just big like Gozer haircut times 100. Yes. Like, love it. And the sunglasses. Yeah. Did you notice, of course, I mean, it's not that big of a leap, but I think it's after the second kill and she's changing clothes and she's wearing like a black lace bra, but she's got blood all over her. I was like, blood and black lace. Great. Horror royalty here. Nice. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's when she goes and stares into the mirror really intently. It's another incredible shot of her. She's so good in this. Yeah, she's fantastic. From the stage, that's kind of where I think Barker knew her from, seeing her performances there. And she's absolutely fantastic in this. She walked out after 10 minutes of this movie at the premiere and has never watched it because she does not like horror movies. She was very adamant that in the interview that I saw that she was like, it's not for me. I don't like, and she kept like saying like, this isn't real. This is just a big fantasy. So it's fine. That just that idea of even being around this kind of stuff is just no thanks. It's an anathema to her. Yeah. She did say that, the first question that she asked Clive after reading the script was, Clive, will I have to take my clothes off for this one? And he immediately said, yes, because we have to believe that she will murder 3 men for this man. So she was like, okay, that makes sense. I buy it.
Well, I mean, and that's, again, this sort of, I don't want to say transgressing, but it is sort of breaking from the more norms of the time. I mean, there was other horror movies happening. There always are. But really, the mode was slasher. That was the big thing. I mean, Freddy was being a thing. Jason talked about halfway through his run. And so by removing it from like Teens in the Woods to like a married middle-aged person with a grudge,
right,
and kind of reclaiming her sexuality, that's a whole different ballgame. You kind of joked about it being like more intelligent, but it certainly feels more adult in that way.
For sure. There's more going on. Not saying one's better than the other, but, because I'll watch them all.
Yeah.
However, yeah. However, watching like a chamber piece family drama with interdimensional Cenobites, that's great. Yeah. I mean, you could almost see this on a stage because it's so contained.
Right. Which now I'm just thinking it's not really a family drama, but now I'm wishing the Cenobite showed up in Conclave. That would have been pretty great if like one of the guys running for Pope is actually a Cenobite. And
right.
I would have enjoyed that.
A long con.
Like, I don't know about that Pinhead guy. Is he? No, he's fine.
He's fine. How will the Pope hat fit on Pinhead?
Very carefully.
Yes. Speaking of the man that she has lost interest in, Larry, played by Andrew Robinson. I went back and rewatched Dirty Harry after watching this a few weeks ago in prep for this because he was I can't even remember the guy's name. But he's
Scorpio
the villain
killer.
Scorpio, my goodness. Yeah. He's fantastic in that. And he said that he wasn't getting calls for anything but maniacal killers at the time. And he was just like, I just don't want to do that. Yeah. He finally got brought in to play Larry, I believe Rory in the book. But evidently he was a little bit of a big shot on set.
Oh, really?
But he still gave it his all. And he was full professional. But he was a little bit, he was like, well, I was in Dirty Harry.
Yeah.
We love him, of course, as Garrick in DS9.
Yep. And his role in Charlie Varick also good.
Very good. Yeah. Has he shown up in another Heard a Bit movie? Yeah. I feel like he
Blood Wings, maybe.
Gee whiz, Blood Wings. It always goes back to Blood Wings.
It always goes back to Blood Wings.
God.
I can't wait for Hellraiser 5 Blood Wings. It's that same small town. What keeps happening?
Well, Doug Bradley's in that, right?
That was Pumpkinhead.
That the fourth one?
That was Pumpkinhead 3. He was Dr. Frazier.
That was it. You know what to do right there.
Oh, yeah. I just said the name to do that, to do the sting. Yeah.
I mean, I think he's great in this, and it's really fun to watch him. Of course, towards the end of the movie, he starts playing Frank in Larry's skin. And I think he does a fantastic job in that. But he does a good job of being just that kind of, he's not really put upon, but he's just so boring.
He's just a little wimpy guy.
Yeah.
He's got that dog in him a little bit. Like you see it when he's watching the boxing, that he's like, oh, punching like the guy, like the men on the TV.
Yeah.
But he's not like henpecked and put upon where this Julia is this horrible, overbearing figure. He's just a guy.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
and it's okay to just be a guy sometimes.
Yeah, it's just fun.
You know? But yeah, I like him just fine in this, and he plays his role. And my God, I sometimes have to look away when he gets cut on the hand by that nail because that just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, it's gross and gushy. And yeah,
Kirsty. She's not even really a final girl because she's not in a group of teenagers.
Well, I mean, she's just not really a presence in this movie for a lot of it. I mean, she's there. It's not like she just shows up at the beginning and then at the end, but it's really so much more focused on Julia and Frank and Larry.
Jennifer Tilly auditioned for this part.
Oh my God.
Might have been a lot different.
Would have been, very different.
Yeah, she's fine in this. In the book, she was like a family friend instead of a stepdaughter. So they were just like, you know what this brutal sexual horror movie needs? Incestual overtones. Like let's push that here. Yeah. But she's fine. She's got a good scream and all. And
I mean, the characters, there's just not much to that character.
Right.
So out of everyone, she's kind of, probably fleshed out the least. Well, her boyfriend,
the actor who played the boyfriend evidently was just like, kind of pouting on set all the time because he didn't have more to do, because he wanted to be like a heroic like guy who saves the girl. And it's just like, dude, that you are so not the main character of this movie at all.
You look like if Harold from Twin Peaks was in Depeche Mode. You're not going to do anything. Lenny Von Dolan on keys. Like, it's not. Calm down. That was and like, he's not great, and the dubbing over him is pretty rough.
She's like you. She's so damn polite.
Yeah? Meaning what?
Oh, I don't know. She's uptight and frigid.
I beg your pardon.
See, there you go. I beg your pardon.
Hey, we're not all frigid.
Oh, no?
Oh, no.
Oh, no?
Oh, no.
That's not what I heard.
Well, you must have been speaking to all the wrong people.
The dubbing over everybody, like, I didn't find out why if that was New World Pictures, because they ended up giving a bunch of money to them to be able to finish it, which is why some of the effects are as good as they are, particularly the rebirth scene.
Yes.
Having Sean Chapman, who plays Skin Frank, and then Oliver Smith, Skinless Frank, both be dubbed, so they share the same voice, fine. You could have done it with whatever, but just the weird thing of it being in England, but nobody's British. Except for Julia and the people she takes home, was kind of strange. But
especially because even like Clive Barker was by no means a household name at the time, but he was starting to come into his own as like a British horror author. Like that was very much his identity. Like Stephen King was already calling him out as like the future of horror.
Right.
Couldn't even put his story in Britain, like. Yeah.
I mean, he had a couple of movies out already based on his books. One known as Underworld or Transmutations, which they mucked up pretty good. And then Rawhead Rex, which is apparently the one that drove him over the edge. And I've been to make my own. Both were done by this guy, George Pavlou. Rawhead Rex is like, it's fine. Yeah. But like, if you know the source material, they fucked it up hard. Like all the depth in the iconography there, they got rid of it to make Rawhead Rex like a mean warthog. He looks like Bebop from the Ninja Turtles.
Yes. So you mentioned the additional funding that they got. The budget for this was $900,000. I believe they were sending cuts to New World, and New World was like, "Hey, this is actually pretty darn good. Let's make it better," which count on one hand how many times that happens, really.
Yeah. So from New World.
Yeah, exactly. So, the one thing that they did do was, like, as you mentioned, they went back and the Frank rebirth scene was not originally done. And my gosh, I'm so glad they went back for that.
Yeah.
That's one of the great gore scenes of the 80s.
So originally, like, Frank just kind of falls out of the wall and he's like a dusty mummy, because Clive Barker loves the Mummy, and one of the production designers also really liked the Mummy. So like, oh, that's cool. And it's a fine puppet. That one of the animators was talking about how like the thing was way more complicated than it needed to be. It was very frustrating, but it's like, it was still cool and whatever. But making it this goopy, disgusting thing, it's so and again, like, really, really early on, you're just getting this huge, gory, awful thing. Amazing. It's still, even the modern day of everything being digital and cool effects, like, you can kind of see how the sausage was made with this, but it's still an amazing scene.
Yeah. And I feel sad for him almost. He looks like he's in pain getting put back together. Definitely that big scream at the end.
Yeah.
It's so beautifully shot. He looks very uncomfortable for a skinless man coming back to life, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising how uncomfortable a skinless man could be.
Right.
But yeah, it is that kind of like weird, monstrous birth. Like there is like a weird bit of empathy there.
It starts below the floorboards with the beating heart, which is fantastic. Like there's something living down there.
Which, watching the documentary Leviathan, which is a 4.5 hour documentary about Hellraiser. So if you want all the marginalia about Hellraiser, check that out. Yeah. But I like all the effects guys talking about having to go into chemists, go into drugstores and be like, "Can I have all your condoms?" Like, just getting box of condoms. And like one guy at the shop was like, "Are you going to a party?" Yeah. And he's like, "No, I'm going to fill it with blood and attach it to a guy." But yeah, the little kind of like pulsing heart you see at the beginning when Frank, because Larry cuts his hand, spills it on the attic floor, and that, like, I don't know if also that Julie is thinking of Frank kind of conjures that up as well. There seems to be this kind of intentionality there. Yeah. But yeah, there's a weird little like thing that pulses under the ground and reacts to it. And that was just a condom a guy like was blowing with a straw.
So good.
Yeah, covered in guts. But yeah, eventually he starts molding together and just one of the goopiest body. Like it's a reverse body melt.
Yes,
but it's nasty as hell. That's Bob Keane that did the animation. Just really just amazing work from Bob Keane and his team.
Yeah, he worked on Aliens before this, so big old fan right there.
Yeah.
One of the other things that happened with the oh gosh, this is turning out well that I definitely wanted to touch on was they decided that if we're going to give you another $100,000 to do some of the effects, well, we're also going to have our way with a few things too. And so that's when they hired a different person to score the film. So this is really interesting to me because one of my favorite bands from a while ago, Coil, was going to be doing the score for this. And that's not just kind of like, oh, a weirdo band is going to do like the new Freddy album or Freddy movie or something like that. Like, no, Coil was like a weirdo bunch of dudes in the London like club scene in the early 80s making very strange music. And Clive Barker was hanging out with them. It was just like, sure, what you guys are doing sounds exactly what I need. People kind of came and went from Coil, but the two main guys were two queer men who were very into the BDSM scene and like piercings and all of that kind of thing as well. Their first album is called Scatology. It just has a nice big butt on the front cover.
Sure.
So Clive was like, oh, this works for me. Get to work. Yes. Supposedly it was Sleazy from Coil, Peter Christopherson, who showed Clive all the PFIQ magazines with all the extreme piercings and mutilations and stuff that he became so fascinated with. Something that those guys were very into. But so for the longest time, that album has been unavailable, but they did put it out recently, past few years. So if you want to hear what the original soundtrack was going to be, it's called The Unreleased Hellraiser Themes by Coil. And I definitely suggest checking that out. I play it somewhat regularly. I like the main Hellraiser theme that they came up with in the end, but this was just a lot more original sounding. It's strange. Yeah. And on the new Arrow box set, I was very heartened to see that they gave a special feature of this like 20-minute long interview with one of the remaining members of Coil talking about their experience in making the film and interacting with Clive, which was neat just to see like this cult underground band getting like official recognition on a major like release, which is pretty neat. So check out Coil. Yeah,
he had said that he liked them because their music, Clive Barker had said he liked them because their music like made his bowels churn.
Yes.
Like, is that good?
Yeah, right.
Man, have you heard the latest Coil? It makes me poop.
Yeah. Right.
I love it. But I do really like the theme created by Christopher Young because it does have that kind of big operatic feel that a lot of this has. And really sets the tone for all of it.
Yeah. What they came up with is definitely good. I would have loved Coil to have had that soundtrack.
I'm sure Coil would too.
Yes. They did okay. Sort of. John, who's the vagrant?
Well,
riddle me this.
Well, are we talking lore canon speaking or
let's go with what he is in this film to begin with.
So he's a guy who looks a lot like my friend Graham, which is very, very funny. But
or Alan Moore.
Though that's even better. But yeah, he's this creep that keeps showing up around Christie. It's unclear what his deal is until the very, very end. I really enjoy this because particularly like it happens repeatedly in at least in the ones that I've seen is that at the end transforms into like a bone dragon that steals the box back that he's just like, I'm a different guy from hell. See ya.
I mean that bone dragon deserves to be like on the side of a van. It's
absolutely
so cool. I mean, and some people complain about that effect, and I'm just like, I don't care. I think it looks great. I don't care if it's the last shot of the movie and it looks a little janky. Like it's fantastic. It's a bone dragon, man.
Yeah, I think the bigger monsters in this suffer. They're not as great as the other ones because I think they clearly they didn't have the budget for them to do what they wanted to do. But it's also, I think, those more humanoid personal demons work a lot better with the story than some of these, but they're still cool looking and I like them.
Sure. But you would love this. Evidently, towards the end of the shoot, this is one of the last bits that they shot. And Clive just turned to everybody and said, wouldn't it be cool if he just turned into a dragon? Can we make that happen? And then everybody was just like, we have no money left. And so the guy who ended up doing that effect did it for like 700 pounds over the weekend. And he's just like, this is what you got.
Yeah.
But that is one of those like, oh, the director's got a bright idea that's going to ruin my weekend.
Oh, really? Do you? That's great. You have an idea, Clive.
Yeah, bone dragon. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just use one of the ones that we've got lying around. Thanks, right. Clive.
Yeah. Yeah, so that guy shows up. He shows up at the pet store, which, if we wanted to go down the realm of like real analysis, like I feel like that pet store has all kinds of like, it's got cages. It's got a snake that looks kind of like the puzzle box, like with its scales.
Design, yeah.
Yeah, like it's kind of like a golden looking snake. And there's like a kid like tapping on the glass, which you could interpret as that kid also like tempting fate by opening that cage, There's just this natural human thing to do to tempt fate and to be like, yeah, what would this be like? That sequence is kind of interesting. They evidently only had like 2 hours to film in there. And so some of these things I'm just like, is this the result of them rushing to get the shot that I see this iconography in here? Or is it just like, we just had to get a few close-ups, man.
Right.
And like that kid at the snake, that was a
turns
cutaway.
Out it worked. Yeah.
But if you think that represents the puzzle box, good on you.
I'm not going to tell you no.
Right. But I think some of that kind of stuff can work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as far as the other big monsters, like the engineer, I love that guy, even though you can kind of see like a few like Flintstones looking feet, like of the effects people behind it. Don't care. It's amazing. What I think is so funny about that creature is that it appears when Kirsty, again, just kind of opens the puzzle box that it was left in her hospital room. So she opens that, walks down a hallway, sees a monster, turns back around, runs out.
Yeah.
Kind of it.
Yeah.
It was just kind of an excuse for, and I don't even remember if that's in the book necessarily, but I think it was like a fun excuse just to make a big monster. Don't really need a story beat for me personally.
Yeah. I mean, you get a little glimpse into these other worlds, and it's something a little bit more than just the Cenobites showing up.
Like a humanoid looking thing.
Yeah. Like deepening the mythos a bit, just again, in this way that doesn't explain anything. In this way that doesn't explain anything, but also broadens it all out. Sometimes you're going to get this guy. Ooh, what's he about? I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's hope the other weirdos show back up.
That scene does have some good stuff with the other Cenobites. So let's give them their due. We've got Chatterer, which is probably my favorite. I love that design. His
name on set was Poor Bastard.
Yeah.
Because you can't see anything in that. And the guy who just watching Leviathan, the guy who plays Chatter is just a completely lovely individual. Just such a nice guy. Nicholas Vince. And it was just this positive force, and everyone would be like up at 5 a.m. getting makeup on.
Yeah.
And one of the other, I think it was Butterball, was talking about having that done to him. There'd be this point where like everyone's kind of in this Zen silence because it's so early, but we're just quietly getting that. And then Nicholas would show up and be like, "Hey, great morning, everybody. How are you doing?" And I was like, "Shut the fuck up, man."
He's just greeting the morning, man.
Yeah. Just a big morning guy.
Right.
Now, so the story was, I think, wasn't he supposed to be the first, like originally going to be the guy?
Butterball was going to be the guy.
Okay. But then they found out like, well, the makeup he can't articulate in this. So guess what, Pinhead?
Speak, you can't see. Yeah. And then, of course, you've got Doug Bradley and his presence where, is that the first time in almost an hour that we've said the word Doug Bradley in a Hellraiser discussion?
Well, we brought up Pumpkinhead, where he was Dr. Fraser.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. But the Chattering Cenobite is a fantastic design, and really creepy. And it also is responsible for like the best example to me of a Clive Barker movie. I mean, you can talk about the gore and all this stuff, but when Chatterer attacks her at the hospital, and just walks up to her and puts his fingers in her mouth.
Yeah,
like he could have choked or whatever, but no, his fingers in the mouth. that is the most upsetting thing in that entire movie to me. It's just that movie is just, again, it's the wet willy. It's the like,
yeah,
nasty.
Right. So we've got him. We've got the she's just called the female Cenobite. I really love her design too. She's got this weird, piercings that come from her cheeks to her shoulders, which is great. She looks very otherworldly. She has a similar performance style as Doug Bradley, like this kind of disaffected, like,
yes,
we're just here to do kind of a job.
Almost regal,
Yes.
like that we're talking to our lessers, but we're not necessarily derisive, but just hoity or haughty, what I think is the word. Also, but like, and she's got that very just vaginal neck wound that's open, disgusting. And I mean, and I like the differing designs of them because it, again, sort of broadens out like what the hell are these things? Because you have like Pinhead, who has all this intricate stuff, all this flayed skin, Chatter, whose face is all kinds of fucked up. And then you have her who's got some piercings in this thing. And so is it just that she goes, no, I'm good here. Like I've explored as far as I want to go. Yeah. It's just, there's some guy you get open the box and get summoned to this thing and you stub your toe once. You're like, oh, I don't like this. Like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Would you like a refund? Yeah.
Yes. That's the furthest reaches of pleasure and pain for me as a stub toe. Then, of course, Butterball. I love that we have 3 very creepy, violent looking, bloody Cenobites. And then we've got their like goofy friend that just sort of shows up with sunglasses on.
Mom said I had to bring my little brother.
I mean, he looks so different, but still of a piece to the rest of the Cenobites that I still think he looks kind of goofy, but I love him. And maybe it's just he's been around for so long. He's the goofy Butterball guy that you kind of keep around in the afterlife. And
he's just soft and fleshy, and like that. There's one part where he's like playing with his stomach wound that is disgusting.
I saw that. Because I was just about to say, well, what's his whole deal? If everybody else has these piercings and ripped up faces and stuff, and Butterball just has like a weird stomach that he picks at. Yeah.
He just had lap band surgery that went awry. And
right.
Yeah, he's probably the least like visually interesting, but he's still cool. Like he's not the least by much. You know what I mean? It's not a wide margin. He's still extremely cool.
Yeah. It is kind of unbelievable that they even thought to. I mean, it's not like they would have known, obviously, until Doug Bradley steps onto set with that booming voice. Like any other lines that were to go to anybody else, they're now his.
Right.
I don't want to see Butterball try to say, we'll tear your soul apart.
Yeah.
It just
sounds like Eric Cartman. Yeah. Now there's stories that initially Doug Bradley wanted to be one of the moving men when they moved the mattress, because at the time, the story is that at the time, Pinhead was just more of a sidekick guy, that he was the main Cenobite. So it's like, could I get my face on the screen versus spending 8 hours in makeup to go, that's right, boss.
Yeah.
But then Doug Bradley interview said that it was always planned that he was always planned to be that. But he told a couple other stories in that Leviathan thing that people kind of contradicted. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where if like, especially not just like on EPKs or video behind the scenes or something like that, but he's also been going to cons for 35 years now. And I'm sure that he's tried to figure out a way to perfect the story over the years too.
I mean, sometimes it's just your memory fails you, because like one of the guys, I think it was one of the guys who actually like operated the engineer, talked about how it was his hand at the beginning putting the face back together. And it wasn't until years later that they were like, no, we actually reshot that scene because the meat, it's my hand.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh my God, I've been living a lie.
Right. I've been telling everybody at the cons.
Yeah. So it could just be that, the story became real, or, maybe it actually happened. I don't know, but it's just kind of funny. He did, when he does the first day of shooting as Pinhead is actually towards the end of the movie, when after Larry has been skinned, his first thing is Pinhead was to go,
we want the man who did this.
It's a really stilted performance, because he was still trying to figure out what he wanted to be, and he was also fighting the costume, because he felt he was tripping over the cloak, unsure how to deal with that. And so they were like, well, all right, we won't see the bottom, so let's get a grip. Let's clip it up. Let's fold it up and clip it a little bit. So we had these clothespins or whatever hanging from him. And he's like, I'm supposed to be menacing.
Yeah,
and I've got like a hiked up skirt. And I'm like, who is this? And so he kind of had to fight through that. So it's a little awkward read, but he definitely finds his footing because good God.
Yeah.
It would not be the same movie without Doug Bradley.
Not at all. I mean, he has so many great lines throughout that have been oft repeated, oft sampled by metal and industrial bands because that deep voice is just too cool.
Yeah.
And boy, at the time, I'm sure he had no idea that 40 years on, he'd still be talking about Pinhead and all the sequels that he was in.
Probably not a lot of talk about Deader, but
yeah,
was he even in that one?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. One last thing about Butterball, even though this is completely out of order, but I loved when they were running from the house is collapsing. The other Cenobites get like zapped out of existence or whatever because they can just open and shut the box at willy-nilly at this point, really. Butterball goes down because a beam falls on his head. And then all of a sudden he's done and he's out for the count. So dude didn't even like put up much of a fight. And he is very easily taken out by these corporeal things.
Chatterer has that he's hiding under a veil for some reason. It's very cinematic, and that's kind of cool. And then the female Cenobite is dragging the knife along the wall, and the wall is bleeding.
Yeah.
All that stuff's super cool. And then he's like, oh, I'll just try to stab a guy.
Yeah.
And then
he goes out.
Sorry, Butterball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we end up with like a family fight at the end because Kirsty ends up stabbing Julia.
No, Frank ends up stabbing Julia while trying to stab Kirsty.
There you go. All what you said. And so Julia's out, kind of.
Yeah,
I think her face turns all gray.
Yeah, that was the thing I did not understand. That like he kills her and immediately she just is a mummy. Like she's just all disgusting. And I don't know if that's supposed to be like that because she became so vile in life that this happened.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? And then the Cenobites appear and they are pretty stoked on the fact that when they find out that Frank's wearing a Larry suit, essentially, they're like, aha, we've got our man. Chains come, and that's where we get that famous shot that we were talking about earlier. That is a bit where they were just saying like, yeah, Andrew Robinson was just like hanging on some sort of support beam for hours and hours and hours as they were trying to rig up the effect to happen. And that's when everybody said like he was a consummate professional. He was like in a good mood the entire time. He was like, yep, it hurts, but I'm here. You know, I'm doing this. Gives his famous line.
Jesus wept.
And I do enjoy that Clive, any good director, is like, well, the best idea wins, because in the script it was just ending with fuck you. And that's just not nearly as cool.
Yeah.
I don't know why Jesus wept right there, but
because is it like quoting the Bible? Is it like, you know, saying it like an expletive almost, where it's like Jesus wept?
Oh, yeah. Or
I mean,
at the end of all this pain, Jesus wept, you know.
And I mean, not to presume that I can do better than a classic, but I think he should have gone, here we go again.
Oh, yes.
I think that would have endeared him to audiences. People would have resonated with that more.
Right. Frank, he's got some good ideas.
It's a living.
Yeah, it's a living. Yes. Yeah. I believe when I was going over the people who died in this movie, Frank gets 2.
Oh, yeah.
That's fair, right? Because he does
it's 2 different Franks.
Life.
And it's 2, because it's like in either case, you can make an argue for him not being dead.
Sure. Because
he got torn apart, transferred to this other realm. What's different the second time?
Right. So he's back.
You could modernize this up, making Frank like a manosphere guy, because he's like, you know, he's kind of a hustler and like a playboy, a pickup artist. And then it's like, you know, fellas, you know how often you need to get more skin? Don't do it yourself. Get a woman to do it for you. You know, you should be training your women to get you skin.
Right.
To bring other Phil Collins looking guys back to the house so you can eat their blood.
I was trying to go with some sort of social media thing right there, but
there's no reason to, because it's terrible.
Luckily, I'm so far outside the manosphere that I didn't know.
Yeah. There's no reason I should know about it. But
the mana box.
I mean, that is kind of, you know, in a way, like, not to sound like too much of an old man, but the particularly the early internet was a little bit like the Lament configuration in that it didn't open up people to like, there's other people that like to pee on stuffed animals. I thought I was the only one.
Yes.
But rather than being like, then we like explored and found all this other stuff. It's like, no, we created forums and told each other how we were doing it wrong.
Yeah,
like
right.
That's what it came out of it, not hooks and whatever. Mm-hmm. But it is kind of funny thinking about this now and just the accessibility of all kinds of sex and violence that you have access to now.
Yeah.
And how like transgressive this was at the time versus what we have now. It's like watching Ken Russell's The Devils.
Oh yeah.
Still very transgressive, whatever, but there's so much stuff in there that when I saw it in the X-rated version at the Hollywood Theater, I was like, this is kind of like Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Like that's just Game of Thrones now. But there's other iconography and stuff that it's a bit more
blasphemous.
But, right. But it is still just, I kind of had to put myself in that mindset. And some of it is also, you spend a lot of time watching horror movies that you don't necessarily think about it the same way, but that this was wild for being 1987.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, unless you have any objection, let's honor our dead. Frank Cotton, played by Sean Chapman, torn apart by chains. Mr. Prudhoe, played by Anthony Allen, head bludgeoned 3 times with hammer. Second victim, played by Leon Davis, head bludgeoned with hammer. Stanley Sykes, played by Michael Cassidy, head bludgeoned with hammer, blood sucked down by Frank. Larry Cotton, played by Andrew Robinson, head bludgeoned. Julia Cotton, played by Claire Higgins, knifed in stomach, blood drained, skin torn off in bed. Frank Cotton, again torn apart by chains. 7 big bodies in this movie. Again, counting Frank twice. Okay, so let's just get this out of the way as we wrap up. 11 films, 7 dead bodies in this one. What's your count?
Oh, God.
If we just do the quick math, 7 times 11, 77. But I kind of have a feeling that, as we always say, the body count's going to go way up.
I mean, 3 gets nuts. I remember that.
Right.
So I'm going to go 115.
Going big?
Going big. Going 115 bodies.
I'm going to say, because from what little I remember of all those direct-to-DVD ones, those budgets were too low to really have a lot of highly effective kills. But I agree, part 3 is pretty nuts.
Yeah.
And I can't really remember all the death scenes in the Hulu one, but I'm going to go 99.
Yeah, I probably overshot significantly, but whatever.
That makes it fun.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I'm putting my hopes on this, that more people die.
Right.
We'll get into it a bit more for the next one because she focuses more, but Julia is really the villain of this piece. Julia and Frank are really the villains and not Pinhead, but people responded so much to the Cenobites and to Pinhead that they're like, well, we got to do, he's going to become a bit more of the focus. But Julia, Claire Higgins in particular, like in the next one, is so good. And I love her as it. Yeah, as a movie villain. Wicked stepmother
to evil queen.
Yeah,
basically,
and just the like talking about that mixing of sex and violence. When she is called upon to murder these guys, an easy out or like an easy thing would be like, well, she's kind of struggling with it, and then she, like in the way that final girls often are depicted, like they become more like masculine in their power or something like that.
Right.
That rather than go for that sort of masculine penetration thing of like we'll stab people. That she's clubbing them with hammers. Again, this really sort of like primal, violent, hands-on, corporeal sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, there's a better way to do that, but the hammer thing is brutal, and she gets even nuttier in the next one.
I love that she just leaves it hanging in that room too. It's just on a nail. She's like, well, no other place that this needs to be used except for my kill room.
Yeah. It's like, got that tip from Martha Stewart. Just
leave your hammer on the kill floor. You won't have to look for it. Yeah, but she gets her face ripped off at the end of the film. She's holding the puzzle box. So they kind of like come across her in bed. Like, was she trying to, open it herself? So by that point, she's on board.
Yeah, because I mean, we talk about the consent aspect of it. That it is supposed to be this. That the stabbing wasn't enough karmic punishment for her. That there had to be this other sort of comeuppance. But yeah, when they find the body and she's posing with the box, it does kind of seem like they recognize a fellow traveler.
Yes,
they're like, this put you on the thing. All right, your life has been forfeit, so it's ours now, and we're going to do with whatever. With it. And we'll see. I don't remember how much they go into that in the next one. We'll find out, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, so she's not quite a Cenobite, but is like a Cenobite acolyte, I guess.
I'm excited for part 2.
Part 2 is so much fun. It's a much different movie.
Yes.
But it's really fun.
It's so goopy. If you haven't seen part 2, it gets even goopier. So and definitely keep with that. And
this is the only one that Clive Barker directed. But we'll have some more Clive Barker related nonsense for you on the Patreon coming up.
Yeah.
So we're not done with him yet.
Right. Yeah. So we're planning to look at some of his other stuff over there on the old Patreon. And thanks to everyone who has signed up for that. That's really gratifying that you want to hear us yakking more about horror movies related, and Twin Peaks too.
Yeah. Happy to take suggestions from people and hear what you think about this stuff as well.
Absolutely. But as I was saying at the top here, folks, if there was ever a series to just hang with us with, just like, let's go through the gauntlet together on this one. Let's just all join hands and let it all hurt a bit. We're getting our pleasure up top and it's going to be painful at the bottom, but hang with us.
Did you ever read the Dark Tower series?
I read the first one, and when he did the beans, good for your heart thing, I was just like, I think I've had enough. Yeah.
That's surprising.
I know, right?
But towards the very, very end, Stephen King, after writing himself into the story, there's a bit right towards this, almost the final chapter of the final book. It's been, 20 years.
Are you spoiling this for everybody? Just in case?
Only saying that Stephen King breaks into the story all right, hear me out. Yeah. It's the journey, not the destination. And it's what are you doing, Steve? Oh no. And it feels a little bit like that. Look, this is going to suck, but keep listening.
Well, that's what I want. I mean, that is the that is the thesis statement for this podcast. Yeah. So let's all strap in and watch 11 of these. And again, pain and pleasure, buddy.
Right. I was telling my partner Hazel about how the problem with these first ones, that are so popular, whatever, is they've been talked to death. There's so much stuff out there about them. And really, this is for us. These are kind of perfunctory. We just want to get to the crappy ones. And they were like, why?
Right. Yeah. I was telling my partner the same thing. I was just we just kind of these are really good, and people have talked these to death. So let's just get to Deader as soon as possible. So we have a little bit more of a clean slate.
Right. People, for some reason, people haven't gone in on Deader yet. I bet we can unearth something.
I mean, that title had me chuckling for months before I even saw the movie, when I knew what it was called and coming out. So I'm excited to revisit Deader. And Hell World. I mean, okay, so here's a bit of a carrot on a stick for all of y'all out there who are not sure if you want to keep going. Some interesting actors and weird people just show up throughout all these too. You get some first roles of famous people. So you get to see some cool stuff like that throughout.
Yeah, when a Parks and Rec cast member shows up, it's a little disarming.
Right. And I mean, what would a horror franchise be without a Lance Henriksen appearance?
True.
So he's way down there too. So anyway, we're just pleading with you to stay with us on this one at this point. And we're on the first one, not even up to 6 yet.
These are the good ones. These are the good ones.
These are the good ones.
I mean, if you're a longtime listener, if you've made it through, well, I don't even want to say if you made it through Texas Chainsaw, because they just kind of went their own way.
Yeah.
These are going to be, like I said, since it goes straight to video and it becomes just a literal dumping ground.
Yeah.
For just ideas, just so we can save the rights to this.
Right.
Things are going to get a little rough.
A little rough, but we're all in this in this together, folks. So
it'll be fine. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm hoping that we've seen worse. But
yes,
as long as they're not boring. But we'll see.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you for Hellbound. Is it called Hellbound?
Hellraiser 2.
Hellraiser 2. Hellbound. But until then, You can find us on Instagram at This May Hurt a Bit Pod, Hurt a Bit Pod on YouTube, and you can email us at thismayhurtabitpod@gmail.com. And if you're on the old blue sky, you can just look me up at James Strayer. I post stuff every once in a while about the show. So I have not gotten around to making a whole new account on another social media.
What am I supposed to do? Click twice? Forget it.
Yeah, gee whiz. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week for Hellbound. Good night.
Good night.
This has been a Caretaker Press production. It was produced by James Strayer and edited by John C. Myers. Logo by Ethan Kimberling and music by Michael Arthur Holloway, who you can find on Bandcamp. Follow us on Instagram at thismayhurtabitpod and email us at thismayhurtabitpod@gmail.com. Give us a 5-star review over on your favorite podcast app, and we'll see you next time.